All right. Well, welcome everyone to webinar today with GTAC and Procedureflow. So we are in for a treat to see how our folks at Wyndham Hotels and Resorts train faster and smarter. So I'd like to turn this over to Micah Peterson. He's a VP of Product Knowledge from Procedureflow, over 15 years of experience. And I have seen him on various webinars and so engaging, so much knowledge to share. And he will facilitate this conversation today. And I know there'll be a lot of value to everyone. So I hand it over to you, Micah.
Awesome. Thank you, Zangida. Welcome, everybody. We're really excited to have you here today. It's a privilege for me. I'm not going to do a lot of talking today. We're going to be interviewing Jason and Thelma from Wyndham Hotel and Resorts. And so the banner that we put this under here today was, to invite you, and what you might want to learn is how Wyndham trains faster and smarter. And so really that's what Procedureflow has always been about, and was invented to solve a problem. And so what we've promised here today is that we're going to talk to you about visual guides that help people start their job sooner with a lot more confidence and higher quality, scenario-based training, and kind of put that together into a story of how Wyndham's been using Procedureflow. So that's the promise, and hopefully we can deliver on that for you in this short amount of time we have. So the first thing I want to do is just introduce myself. My name is Micah. I've been working at Procedureflow since it got started, but before that, it had a life of its own as a desktop client for 10 years. And I just happened to come in and at a time when it was cool to put things on the cloud. And so we took it, put it on the cloud, and then sold it to other people. And so that's how I came in about 2011. And what we did was we drove around the province of New Brunswick, where there's tons of contact centers. And Stu Marcolin and myself knocked on everybody's door and kind of begged them to beta test our cloud product. And Wyndham Worldwide was the first company to really answer the call. And they actually paid us, which was kind of nice, and gave us really a lot of confidence to go out and sell more. So that original meeting of them with Sue Steves and her group over at Wyndham, and just doing a pilot, jumping in there and them using it. So that was kind of my introduction to Wyndham Worldwide, and really the beginnings of Procedureflow generally. So with us today from Wyndham is a lot of the people that we worked with originally have since retired and gone on to the nice retirement life and gardening and grandparenting and all that good stuff. So good for them. And Jason's here with us. So Jason, you've been at Wyndham for over 10 years, is that right? Doing senior directing of like the tech support group, the system support, and now My Request, is that right? Oh, you're on mute there, I think.
Sorry. Yeah, actually I've been with Wyndham for 18 years and on the distribution side for about six or 7 years.
Awesome. Anything you want to say about your career at Wyndham, or?
Sure. Yeah. For me personally, I started out in the technical support space. So as you can imagine, that can be dry and tough work, and but you think from a technical support perspective, we focused on property management systems, and really our energy was supporting properties, trying to print folios, navigating the books, and doing printer adjustments, things of that nature. So getting over to the distribution world was quite a significant change.
Yeah, awesome. And Thelma, how long have you been with Wyndham?
I've been with Wyndham just under 5 years.
Okay. And what did you do previous to that?
Oh my goodness. I worked in a civil engineering and survey company as their office administrator, and prior to that I worked for 30 years at the telephone company, the last 20 of which were in IT.
Awesome. So you have a really strong technical background, and then what are you doing now with Wyndham?
Right now I am their business process analyst, which means that for our department I take each of the processes that the agents do, and I bring it down into easy to understand terminology and document it in Procedureflow so that they can use that going forward.
Awesome. So Thelma's one of my favorite people on earth, obviously. So she's one of our, what I call the shepherds of the flows. They make sure that everything's harmonizing and make sure it all works together. So we have a really nice representation of two sides of the business. Jason's going to talk to us about, business impact and how Procedureflow is used within the building. Thelma's going to talk to us about how it really goes down on the floor, how you actually get going with a project and things to look out for. So we'll just jump in here. The first thing, I think, Amanda, you're going to run a little poll and just give us an idea of who's with us today in the audience. So if you want to pop that, and we'll give everybody a chance to answer that question. I'm going to say other. Oh, it says the host can't vote. So as that's going on, Jason, why don't you, I'm going to prop up just a PowerPoint here for a minute so people can have a little bit of a visual on recognizing Wyndham. Some people, they have a lot of different brands, and so you might recognize them under different banners. But the first thing here is the, who are you? What does Wyndham do? And then I think also probably it was good for me when I first joined, but to have somebody take you through what is a global distribution system, why is the work complicated, and what do we do here in St. John?
Sure. So let me first talk about Wyndham Hotels and Resorts. Obviously, I can't come on a seminar like this and not plug Wyndham. So we represent 20 brands across 80 countries. We have a portfolio of around 9,000 plus hotels. And right now we're listed as the largest hotel franchise company in the world.
Wow.
And Wyndham started in '81, but it's taken a few different names over the course of that time. I haven't been there that long. I started, as I was saying, in 2002. And we spun off as Wyndham Hotels and Resorts in 2018. And for this audience here, we have a contact center based in St. John, New Brunswick, and we are actually all Wyndham employees in that contact center. So it's kind of a nice environment for us because we all tie into the global operation, and there's 700 plus employees based out of St. John. So, and we just recently went through a mega expansion of our facility. I think we put in another 120,000 square feet, I believe. So it was quite a large expansion. And just for the audience here, being based in Toronto and the various contact centers, I should say, most of you should be familiar with Ramada, Days Inn, Travelodge, Super 8. That's just 4 key brands out of the portfolio we support from our center.
And just for perspective, how many, like if you're the biggest one in the world, how many players at that scale are there actually?
In terms of volume of hotels?
Yeah, like when we see the brands driving by on the highway, there's really only like 4 major players in the whole industry, right?
That's correct. And I think right now we're saying, keep me honest, it's like there's a hotel within 10 minutes drive or 20 minutes drive of no matter where you are.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And I would like to say too that Wyndham is one of my favorite centers to be in physically in the building. Just really well laid out. People really enjoy working there. They have a lot of celebrations and like, they organize all these different days that people dress up and do fundraisers, and they have Dyson hand cleaners in the bathroom that are just, everything's just whiz bang there, and the expansion looks great. I was there at Christmas time. So, it is one of my favorite centers that I've been in so far. Oh, we have our poll results, so I'll just interrupt you, Jason. So we've got represented here today, the largest percentage is other, so they're not trainer operations, manager, or QA. The next one is a contact center managers and supervisors, 30%. So we've got some operational management, and then just general operations and trainers, 20% as well. So that's kind of our breakdown here today. So Jason, what is a global distribution system? Talk to me about black screens and about, what goes down on the back end that we don't see as a consumer.
Well, we have the luxury of being in distribution. So our job is really around getting all of the things that make a hotel visible and sellable to the outgoing public is within our, wheelhouse, so to speak. So we're responsible for rates and content and inventory and promotions and pictures, so everybody knows. They like to see good pictures of the hotel rooms online. So from our perspective, what Thumb and I really drive for is making sure that we have all of these aligned. So we want to have the right rate and the right descriptions of all the hotels on all the channels. So for everybody on this call, we know that our brand website everybody's familiar with, or with Wyndham Hotel Group and the website they have. Then we also have what's called OTAs, commonly known as B2C, which is business to consumer, and B2B, which is business to business. And just, I think most of the audience here would be familiar with Expedia, Booking, Agoda, Hotel Beds, and Mickey, and then there's a whole bunch of metas, which we call out here, such as Kayak, Trivago, things of that nature. Yeah. And then, of course, our team is focused on, obviously, we take 1-800. People still like to call this day and age, which is surprising to me, but they do. And then, of course, GDS. Well, not everybody may be familiar with, but back in the day, they call these applications the old green screens. They were just literally text on a black background with green lettering, and it was just all manual keystrokes and letter and character combinations to generate bookings. So our team is responsible for delivery of all of these elements to all these channels.
Yeah, so that's amazing. And when I've seen it live in person, you have, people have to take all these rates and all these companies and all this stuff, tie it together, punch it into these screens, and make sure that everything is just up to par. And then it's always changing seasonally. So there's just a lot going on for you guys. So that helps us a lot. It gives us a great backdrop. So I'm going to drop the PowerPoint here just so that we can get your guys' face up on the screen. But this is really sort of where we want to start with, is just having you guys share a little bit of your story. So if we start there and just say, what is the story and how did you get started with Procedureflow? What was the setup for that? What was the challenges that you were facing, and why did you bother with answering our call in terms of setting up a beta and having a shot at what we were doing? Oh, you're on mute there, Jay.
I got to learn how to click properly, huh? So we were lucky enough, having already invested a little bit with the RP team and Procedureflow. For me personally, I moved over to the distribution side. Coming from a technical support background, my real focus was SOPs. And if any of you folks remember SOPs, Word docs, and how quickly the technology changed from, Windows 95 to Windows 98, XP. So just trying to maintain that on a technical side, I realized this is not something sustainable. So when I moved over to distribution, I got an opportunity to see this RP team using this Procedureflow, and I realized this is a game changer. We could totally revolutionize how we deliver and support our teams. And biggest issue for us as a team was, just like technology in the distribution space, there's always changes. Either the technology, the processes, the partners you need to reach. It was really a task that I felt through an SOP, it was not something you could achieve.
So what were people doing then? So like what did they have, and then what were you doing to manage changes, before you had Procedureflow?
Oh, well, Thumb will kill me for this, but we were sending out emails, and people were actually printing off those emails and putting them into these binders that were probably, thicker than War and Peace. It was just a struggle to see people carry these binders around. So that's kind of what we realized was that had to change. And we were also going through a central reservation system change, Micah. Yep. So our central reservation system was changing. So everything around what we did from a distribution operation perspective was changing. So the timing couldn't have been much better.
Right. And so when people carry around binders like that, and they're fairly personalized then in terms of it's like my own personal take on what's happening in my world, that must drive a lot of consistency, eh?
Correct. And of course, understanding context and all that stuff. You ask one person, get one answer, ask someone else, you get another answer. So then you're like, so people will be like, what is the right answer here? So we never really had any way to police that from a support perspective. Yeah.
So then why, you saw what the RFP group was doing with Procedureflow, which was basically they had converted Word documents used in training to the small hyperlink flowcharts, and then you saw that demo. So what was compelling about that, bringing it into your group?
Oh, so many things. Just the improvement of the delivery service. We could tell people, put those binders in, archive them however way you deem fit. Figure out we're going to make your life easier. We're going to keep bringing the information to you to support those changes. We can ensure everybody has the same response on everything. And when you do things like that, I mean, from a contact perspective, I'm sure most folks would agree, when everybody says the same thing and you provide them good guidance, they in turn gain confidence quickly. As opposed to asking two different people, same question, getting different answer, you never know who to trust or how to value the response.
Awesome. Yeah, and then when you guys started to roll that out and expand it out beyond what you were doing with the RFP stuff, what impact did that have? You talked about confidence a little bit, but what are some of the other impacts that had for you guys?
Speed to market in terms of delivery of our service, because really hotels would reach out to us, asking us, can you do this? Can you help us with this? That type of thing. So now we had people who didn't get up and need to feel like they had to go and tap on someone's shoulder. And from a contact center, that's a pain point, not only for the person having to get up out of the seat and not feeling like they can complete their job, but the person who's also doing their work, having someone tap on the shoulder for validation with something that should have been clearly known. Another big win, I really would say, is it allowed people to invest in critical thinking skills. Contact center space, people sometimes feel like they're just a drone. They're not really helping support the overall goals. But with our evolution of Procedureflow, we got people to start taking on more critical thinking, and they became a strategic partner versus just a doer of work, so to speak.
Awesome. So just before we leave this kind of that genesis story for your teams on using Procedureflow, is there anything else that you want to add in there?
Thelma's been an instrumental part, and I will say to everybody, it's been a guiding light for us, because we, like I said, changing our CRS changed our business in every aspect of our livelihood. So having a mechanism to provide real-time updates, real-time changes, and allow people an opportunity to review those changes and understand them has been nothing short of key for our success.
Awesome. So that's good. Amanda, I think you have another poll. We're going to transition now from the story piece to talking about scenario-based training. And so we'll get a little bit from Thelma and from Jason here on how that's transformed how you guys do your training and get people onboarded quicker. So scenario-based training, just so people understand, is the idea, and this has been around for a long time. I've just been sort of getting studied up on Kathy Moore and others who really have made a lifetime career out of this. But the idea is that instead of memorizing a bunch of material from a lecture style, it's getting people to touch it faster, more almost like an apprenticeship, where you can give somebody the pieces of a scenario of what would happen in their work, and they can try that sooner. So it takes a little bit more effort in the design of your training, but it's a lot more effective, a lot more engaging, and by industry standard, Jeff Toyster and others would say that it would cut the overall onboarding time by over 50% if you can pull it off. So that's a little bit of a backdrop on scenario-based training. So as you're doing the poll there, that would help you to answer that question and kind of understand, when somebody comes in the classroom on day one, can you start to just give them some view of the systems, give them some pieces of what a customer's asking for or what they need to do for their job? And can they start meddling with that? Can they start playing with it and doing on-the-job stuff? So we'll let you do the poll. Amanda will come up with the results on that to see how everybody is doing that today or not. And the default, honestly, the default is lecture style training to a large degree. with doing some scenario based at the end to test whether people can confidently do the work. So we have here that there's 80% of folks are saying that they're doing it yes some, and then there's about 20% that are saying almost 100% of their material is scenario based, which is great. So talk to us a little bit about scenario-based training. And I don't know who wants to start on that one, but just feel free to jump in there.
Well, I can take that one. So as Jason mentioned a bit earlier, we had started out with SOPs and the big binders and whatnot. And I guess that worked to a degree. It was in its day. But as he alluded to, once the processes started changing, it was difficult to keep everybody up to speed on the most current versions. And so we knew that there was a better way, and what we've done is basically document all of our processes. The agents don't have to use their binders any longer. They're all using the one version of Procedureflow. Mm-hmm. And everybody is using that not only for their day-to-day process, but also for any training that has to be done. If there are new processes coming out, that we use the Procedureflow very heavily in that as well.
Awesome. And you a little bit about sort of that idea of memorization versus real-time guidance. Can you talk about that a little bit in sort of the transformation you've seen as you've gone from what you were doing before to now?
I think the biggest improvement that we've seen is that when we are training our agents, we can talk through a scenario, we can give them the background, we can tell them why they're going to be doing something, and then we can put up on the screen, on one side we can put up the Procedureflow, and on the other side we put up an application that they're going to be updating, and we can walk through back and forth so that they can see these are the steps that they have to do, this is how you do it. They've already got the understanding by this point of why they do it, and so it ties it all together, and it leaves them with a sense of understanding what they're doing. And not just going through a series of steps or memorizing a process. They have that actual understanding in the background. And as Jason had alluded to earlier, they're able to use their critical thinking skills, which is key in a situation like this.
Yeah. So before, they probably, they're watching somebody else maybe go through and do something, but they can't do it themselves. And so there's this kind of lag time between when they'll actually get to do it and then kind of, go, you know what I mean? Like, is that basically what they were doing before?
Well, the general understanding was the big thing. They were able to do the work, but it was, step A, step B, step C, with no real understanding of why they were doing all of this, why they were going through these steps. In the Procedureflow, we are able to document the reasoning behind why they're going to do something. We can include screenshots and snips and give them a lot of information to give them that security that they actually understand what they're doing, and that when they do update something, they see how it's going to affect the end product of what they're working on.
Awesome. Just talk a little bit about consistency, I guess. So how does Procedureflow lead to a group of people, all working off of one single source? So what are some of the components of what you're doing that allow you to bring consistency?
In my role, I had started out as an agent on one of the teams, and so my background in Wyndham is building properties online and then maintaining those properties online. And in the role that I'm doing now, I not only support the Procedureflow for that team, but also the Procedureflows for other teams as well. and tie them together, because we're at the point now where we're doing a lot of cross-training. And it's vitally important that everyone is using one version of instructions, one procedure flow, so that if one team needs an update made to their process, it's not enough just to update their process. Somebody also has to have a look at the big picture and recognize how that change is going to affect how some other team is using that process.
Right. And so that's your role, I guess, is it?
It is.
Yeah. You've got an eye towards, if this changes, then it's also going to impact these folks, and I need to really think about that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I'd like to come back to that a little bit later when we talk about if somebody wanted to start a project like this, what are some of those things to look out for? Because I know that was really huge for you guys. And just a little bit, Jason, you talked a little bit about QA as well, sort of the impact of how does a quality assurance team, what do they normally do? And now if you've got a single source of truth and you've got folks following that, how does that tie in then with the quality assurance team?
So it's a great question. So for us, when I initially got the department, there was a plan on implementing a QA team. Once we started investing some time and resources into Procedureflow, I quickly made a decision. I didn't need a QA team.
Really?
As long as we had a documented step, the only opportunity for addressing with any team member who didn't do something was they just didn't follow the flow. Or they just made the incorrect assumption on the decision, because we use a decision tree style model where we ask opposing question to lead our team members to the end steps they need to take to support the request. And so because we eliminated the QA team, we now have more people focused on doing the work. And it's also from your peers, from a contact center perspective. I don't know how many people have moved from, doing the work to QAing it or being a supervisory role. One of our biggest, objections on the floor is when someone who's doing QA wasn't necessarily doing the work every day.
Yeah.
So getting that feedback wasn't always, I'm not going to say not negatively received, but it wasn't always well received, especially in a changing climate. So once we eliminated that, we invoked a peer review versus a QA review. And that just lended a lot more credibility when a peer just like you was, hey, just as an FYI, this was what was asked. Looks like you missed this perspective. And everybody's taking that with much more welcoming, constructive feedback. So
that's amazing. And that's really one of the first times that I've heard of sharing something like that, because it's usually a fairly dedicated group to doing the quality assurance. And I have heard in the past at conferences where there is this disconnect in the relationship between QA and the agents, because the agents are just getting beat up all the time. Right. And if the folks doing the beating up are not doing that role, that you have this disconnect. And so I just find it totally fascinating that you were able to implement a peer review program and then leverage Procedureflow into that, as that group is helping to maintain and shepherd along with work Don was doing. So. Right. Yeah, kudos to you. I think, Amanda, you have another poll here where we're just going to ask folks how long their training program is, including your nesting. So we want to, and even I would say, if you thought about how long does it take somebody to feel comfortable in the work, as in their quality and their average handle time or their task time is where somebody of average tenure would be at. So how long does it take, not just to be in the classroom, not just to do the nesting, but also to feel a little bit comfortable in the role? And then how many weeks does that take, or months? Sometimes it can take 6 to 12 months to feel like you cover off all the scenarios that you might have to take. So you can go ahead and answer that now. Yeah, go ahead, Tama.
Well, I think their comfort level is established almost immediately. I mean, we don't train them and expect them. We don't train them on everything to begin with. We don't expect them to know everything and learn everything to begin with. So we start out piece by piece, job by job, task by task. And because they can see the procedure flow, they can see the application, they have the keystrokes there, they have the background knowledge, understanding why it is that they're doing what they're doing. And they have the screenshots and examples that we've also put in the procedure flow. They're able to have that understanding, they're able to make the updates, they're able to validate them right there on their own screens that they have done them correctly, and if not, they can go back and figure out perhaps where they've gone wrong. And just the ability to do that, to kind of self-check their work, has given them a huge amount of confidence.
That's amazing. I think we have the poll results here. So about 50% are saying 3 to 5 weeks. There's 30% at 6 to 8 weeks and 20% at 9+. So those are all, you know, a large percent, 50% are, you know, we're close to 2 months and above. So that's a long time to get through the nesting. So again, back to impact, Jason, you talked a little bit, I think when we talked in the past about, you have like an offshoring team. And what was the impact for them in terms of getting to the work faster?
Yeah, so when we decided, because when we were going through this massive transformation of changing our CRS, we couldn't keep the work within our wheelhouse, so to speak. It was just too much work, a lot of point and click just to support dual CRSs, and the volume of work was just insurmountable for the team we had. So we decided to work with a BPO. And one of the BPO's conditions is to, you know, do some hands-on. I think it was 4 to 6 weeks with our team here in St. John. And part of the written discussions in preparation for the integration between the two teams was a 2-week turnaround to deliver the SOPs to their own team. So, you know, and that's because they want to write it in words and terminology being offshore that makes sense to their own staff. Once we took the time to educate them on procedure flow and then how we use it, with the BPO came back to us and said, we don't need those 2 weeks. We're going to just move on to get our agents trained on procedure flow and access and guide them through that program versus trying to establish SOPs. And then they are also in our ecosystem of, as new changes come out, new flows, we don't have to send out mass communications. They maybe get the same updates as someone here in St. John. So it's been a hugely successful venture solely on the fact that we've had no SOPs, a cloud-based tool to give everybody guidance.
That's awesome. It's kind of like you're bringing them into your team almost because you're all working off of the same material.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, that's awesome. Talk a little bit about, you know, in terms of training in a shorter amount of time. Jason, you talked about scalability. So what does the word scalability mean for you in terms of like in this concept of shortening your training time?
Well, scalability is, like Matt alluded to earlier, it's really about making sure you can get this right message out to the teams that have a vested interest in understanding the changes, the scope of changes, the context. But with a tool like Procedureflow for us, you know, speaking on our benefits, our team could be 5, it could be 25, or it could be 200. As long as I've got the decision trees in front of them and allow them to answer those engaging questions to lead them to an answer, we're not limited, of course. And also being international, all they need is an internet connection. It's not housed on some internal intranet that requires some VPN access. So for us, managing through something like COVID, it's been, you know, I didn't have to manage that aspect of our getting everybody to work from home. So that's been hugely successful from our perspective.
Awesome. And I'm curious, like, if you didn't have procedure flow and you had to like have a smaller class versus a bigger one, or you have a bigger one, what are the areas of pain or bottlenecks that you would normally run into, you know, that would the size of your class that you're onboarding would impact.
Exactly that. You know, if I had to, I think I was running with 100 people. So if I had to take people off the floor, find a classroom, you know, trainers are very high demand resource in an ever-changing environment. So trying to get those folks off the floor, dedicate time for 1 to 2 week stints. And if you do a class of 20, that's 5 weeks for 100 people. It's, you know, for a week-long training session, that's 5 weeks of people not helping your environment or, you know, supporting your business. So this allows us to get away from that model, provide them some context, and we could do a day or two training and then give them the procedure flow to help them.
And just before we jump back to Thelma, I want to get some thoughts on how you roll it out and how you run a program with Procedureflow. But Jason, just talk briefly about what does this mean for your operations in terms of if you can really have this almost like just-in-time training where you don't have all that pressure that you normally would have, what does that do for your teams where, you know, work is coming and going or there's lulls or not? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm sure most folks in the contact center space that are here on this call, they would realize that one of our biggest challenges is ebb and flow of work. So, you know, most of your call volume that you staff for, you know, Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 gets answered Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, but you have a completely different line of business doing work at night. But sometimes those need to overlap because you have an important project to get through. So allowing people who are familiar, because they might understand one aspect, but not the full aspect of another line of business, but you're still doing, like for us, we're still doing distribution. So whether I'm loading a raid or changing content or putting in a picture, in most cases, that's work that can be done across the board. So, you know, we've always explained to our folks, we can manage the ebb and flow of our work for our teams and not have a lot of lull time and maximize their value. Plus, that broadens their skill set. So it just helps us from an organized perspective. And one thing I will say, our focus has always been, when I took over the department, it was like 8 teams of 10, you know, 10 teams of 10. We've always strived to have one team of 100. That was our mantra because we wanted everybody to be skilled, and we're working towards that, to be skilled in every job that can meet the volume of the day. That was always our focus.
Yeah. I love that. Sometimes when I go to Costco and you'll see like a person they're doing the carts, you know, 1 minute, and then the next minute they're over in another department, and they're able to, this one and done idea where somebody can cycle through, it gives them job variety, right? So you're not getting bored to death. And then there's people will stick around for longer and that kind of stuff.
Exactly. And it takes people out of the comfort zone too. So for example, I'm really good at doing the cash, not necessarily good at boxing. Well, you know what? I'm going to keep putting you on boxing until you've established that confidence. I'm providing you the training to get through it. Once you're there and you feel comfortable, then I can move you on to something else.
Awesome. Thelma, so talk to us a little bit about, I know there's quite a broad range of things when you would want to take something like this on, but for this audience, I'm sure people are, you know, they know this isn't like snap your fingers and everything's done. So tell us about what it takes to set up Procedureflow, to run it. You know, what do you need? Who do you need? What skills do you need? And what are some problems that you might run into as you're going through and setting up a Procedureflow program?
I think the most important thing is you need to select someone who has a commitment to learning the entire business for the area that's being covered, and someone who can think not in silos, but the whole umbrella effect.
So is that somebody who's like curious then, I guess? Somebody who like, they want to know more about the business and they just keep asking questions and they keep going up?
It definitely helps.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
They might be a little bit of a rebel, maybe, somebody. This is Thelma, right? So,
I'm not going to answer that.
that's all right. And so how much of your time then, as the person who does Procedureflow, how much is dedicated to doing Procedureflow itself?
I would say probably 70% of my time is working on actual updates. The other 30 is divided between understanding what new requests are coming along, what the requirements are, how that's going to impact the various teams, who the key players are, just understanding the background, because if I don't understand it, I can't document it.
That's right.
And if I don't document it correctly, the agents can't do the job correctly. So although I really love what I do it for me, and I don't even do it for Wyndham. I do it for the agents, because everything that I do immediately affects them.
Yeah, that's a really interesting thought, because I find when I'm mapping for customers as well, that's my constant thought is somebody's going to have to use this to do their job. And if I fail them, they're going to hit this piece of logic and they're going to get stuck, or it has to be right, and so it's a motivating thought. So that's really interesting. You're a full-time dedicated resource on Procedureflow pretty much. So you've got 70% going to your mapping time, and then 30% keeping up with the business, really understanding what it is that you're going to be mapping and how it impacts. And then if you are working, we talk about entry points or groups that are working and in silos, we'll say, so they're doing separate pieces of work. But previously you talked a little bit about how sometimes there's work that impacts everybody. So can you talk a little bit about how you think about that?
Yeah. It's a situation where, again, you have to understand what the request is that you've been asked to do. Yep. You have to understand who it's going to impact. You have to understand how it's going to impact them. And only then can you start planning out how you're going to present this in Procedureflow, how you're going to start building things. I have a project right now that I'm in the design stage, and it overlaps into 2 or 3 different teams, and the processes themselves within a given team overlap on each other. And in order to set that out clearly, you really have to understand what it is that you're being asked to do, because if you don't understand it, you can't present it.
Right. So if I make a change, I've got group 1 and they ask me to make this specific change, but we also use those processes for group 2 and 3. It's, you might have to abstract some of that specificity so that the other groups can use it. And so it's that type of logic that you're working in.
What I try to do is drill down to the lowest level of a process. Yep. So if a given process is used by 3 different teams, but that process is made up of 5 steps, then I'm going to have 5 separate procedure flows. And then I can call those flows individually, subroutines, whatever you want to call them, whatever your terminology is. Yep. But I can call those individually. And if one team only uses 4 of those 5, then those are the 4 that I call in their process.
Yeah. And we probably should, I'm looking at the time, and we'll probably need to transition to do some Q&A here, which I think will be really good. But I just want to mention here about Thelma's work and like just how important her role is. And as much as I would like to say anybody can go do the mapping, you do need somebody that's really smart and sharp, and somebody that has that view to how it impacts the business. And so they're logical thinkers, and they're people that really, like Thelma said, they care about the end users, and they're not just going to make a change willy-nilly. They're going to really think about it. And so each organization that uses Procedureflow, they have somebody like Thelma. And so it's one of the keys to success is going to be identifying who are your really keen, sharp people that you can put in charge of this. So So yeah, so thank you, Thelma, for all the work that you've done at Wyndham and helping Procedureflow to be really sharp. So I'm going to jump over. Amanda's going to start feeding us some of the questions that could come in. So as we switch over now, if you guys have questions for these guys that you want to ask them, this is your time to do that. And we've got probably about 10 minutes to be able to tackle that. So Amanda, I don't know if you want to come on by voice and just sort of give us some of those questions, or.
Hi, yeah, we got one. I just sent it in the chat. One question we got is, how can you keep employees engaged using Procedureflow over time?
Oh, go ahead, Thelma.
Well, first of all, it has to be, they have to be able to trust it. They have to know that it's current and that it's accurate. If they find that they can't trust what's in there, you're going to lose them very quickly, and it's very difficult to get them back.
Yep.
You can use the snips from the applications. You can use screenshots. You can reach out just to kind of break up the monotony of box after box after box after box, and make it visually appealing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think quite early on, we recommend, sometimes we recommend against screenshots because they can bloat the amount of space it takes to explain a process. But then we had to give a little bit, and Wyndham was one of the first ones that made us realize that just adding a few screenshots here and there, it brings color. It almost like brings it to life and makes it more like they're seeing what they're going to be doing. And so so doing little things like that can really help to enhance the experience for sure. And then in terms of, Jason, do you have a thought there about that as well?
Yeah, so I was just going to say, from my perspective, it's not necessarily a tool that we want to force people to use. It's where we use it as a decision tree and logical thinking and path to resolution. Once people get really good at their work, then I don't expect them to use Procedureflow. But as the business changes and new updates come out, they need to go in and check and make that just a validation. Did the keystrokes that I do every day for this particular task change? Yes or no? Yeah. If the answer is no, then you feel free to do what you've been really, able to learn and grasp rapidly and execute those steps. But if it changes, you go and understand the scope, embrace it, understand it, and then you now have the tools to do that work.
Yeah. And that's something that I try to help them out with too, is that when I make changes to existing processes, I might be touching 20 different flows, but I group them all together and I put a title on it, and I begin it with rates or OTA or content. And then the agents go in every morning and they're supposed to look and see if there are new updates. And if they're on the content team and they see content, well, they know that they have to go in and see what has changed. But if they are on the rates team and they go in and they see content, well, that doesn't necessarily apply to them.
Yeah.
So.
And just for context for people who don't know Procedureflow, we have side-by-side comparison with visual markup. So as you're going through the visual flows, we show the old and the new, and then we mark what's changing and what's different. So it's very easy visually to pick that up. And we've also got reporting that shows you who's looking at the changes, who isn't, where are people going, and all of that. And so there's some really interesting data that you can derive there too. So that's just to help people understand a little bit of how this is different than just sending out a whole bunch of emails or, reread this document, that type of thing. So any other questions that are coming in, Amanda?
Yeah, we have one. So do agents use these SOPs in Procedureflow for every type of call, and how many SOPs would you have?
Wow. For us, we are not a call-based team. We are truly a service delivery team. So we use Procedureflow on all the job types, all the request types that come into our team. And that we again, not everyone is unique, the same. You can imagine 9,000 hotels globally with varying brands. It's truly, for us, it's a decision-based application. We guide people to the keystrokes they need to do to execute the end result.
Yeah, I can say from my experience working with other customers that even if it is a call center, that they will eventually, they'll start with the heavy hitters first, what's causing the most pain and we get the most volume on, and that would work for back office as well. And then they keep working down that list until they get even the most trivial stuff in there, and their goal is to have 100% so that a new person can come in, hit any type of call or scenario and be able to handle that. So there is some time to work through getting them all in there, and you just stack it as a priority and hit off your heavy hitters.
And so far as how many flows we have, I'm just looking at a report here. And because I drill down to the lowest level of a process and document them individually, we have probably in the area of about 2,000 flows.
Yeah, that's actually pretty reasonable. We know that in some contact centers, they would have anywhere from 500 to 2,000 different kinds of call types. So you could expect that number of flows at least. And then our largest customer is an American health insurance customer. And we know that they have well over 10,000 flows in one single claims processing, just because of the medical industry is very complex. So, that would be the most complex. And then probably at the easier end of things, you might be around 500. Any more questions there, Amanda?
No, that is it.
Okay, we'll do a last, if anybody has anything that they want to ask, feel free to drop that into the chat. And just make sure it says all panelists and attendees when you do it, just so that we can all see the questions that you're asking. And I'll just add here at the end, before we wrap up, Jason and Thelma, do you guys have any final thoughts that you'd like to leave us with about your experience using Procedureflow?
From my perspective, it's been a very good partnership in terms of allowing us to expand our business, gain way more efficiency, and provide tools to our associates or team members to allow them to do their job effectively and with confidence. And really, that's probably one of the biggest wins. Plus, people don't have to carry around 30-pound binders. So that's been a huge game changer for us.
They're going to have to find a different way to work out, I guess.
That's right.
Thelma, any last thoughts from you?
Yeah, from my perspective, what I really like about Procedureflow is how easy it is to use. It's not a complicated tool at all, but it is so powerful. And when you are able to explain something clearly, then it makes everything so much easier for the agents. And Procedureflow has been wonderful in its simplicity, not only from my perspective to create flows, but also for the agents to read them, to follow them, to understand them, to know what the shapes mean, to know what the different colors mean. And there's only, a handful of options of both, but it covers everything. So it's been wonderful.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a great thought. When I first started mapping, I had all these ideas for all these shapes that we would put into the product, and it ended up that we only had 7, and that covered off the basis. So, well, I just want to say thank you, Zangita. Thank you so much for having us as part of.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just hand it back to you, but I want to say thank you to Jason and Thelma. It's been a lot of fun just chatting with you guys today, and so appreciate your time and the willingness to come and speak here. So, Zangita, I'll just pass it back to you.
Yes, thank you. What a wonderful session. Thank you, Micah, Jason, Thelma. It's been very insightful, and we appreciate that you shared your journey with Procedureflow, and I feel it'll be tremendous value to our GTACers. And what a great way to end the week, go into the weekend and heading into Canada Day with people from one of my favorite places ever, the East Coast. So thank you, everyone. And thanks, GTACers. Stay safe and have a wonderful Canada Day next week. And that's a wrap. We're going to take a little break for a couple weeks in the summer, but hope to connect with all of you soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Take
Thanks
care.
for joining,
Take
everyone.
care. Bye-bye.
Have a good
Bye.
weekend.